Well, we do have Jerry Dipoto with us, as we generally do on Thursdays. Thanks, everybody, for just allowing for some schedule changes today with what was going on in Kansas City and the early baseball game, et cetera. But it's nice to be joined by Jerry Dipoto right now. And, Jerry, I don't know, all of a sudden this team is hot on Wednesdays, which has been fantastic.
Yeah, and as I said to Maura when I was checking in, I apologize for the audio in the background, but I can't seem to get away from it over here at the park. Weird things happen in Kansas City.
Well, that's for sure, man. These last 3 games have just been bizarre. Like, what is it about that park, the weather, the team? Like, what is it that makes for such strange games there?
You know, I actually I have family here. You know, my dad, my brother were sitting with me last night, and I can remember so many unusual games here dating back to even when I was playing. So I don't know what it is. Maybe the most bizarre game I can recall in recent vintage was just last September when we were here. And if you remember, like the 10-run innings that were, going back and forth between each team while we were in the midst of a pennant race in September. And just, weird and wonky things happen here. Maybe we just don't match up as well as we'd like to against the Royals.
Hey, Jerry, take me back to your playing days when you were a player and it was game 120 of a season. Where is your mind and body at here in mid-August, 120 games in?
Your body's kind of done, and this is it's true. And you're in month 5 of a 6-month season. You played for 6-7 weeks in spring training, and you prepared before that. And the innings are starting to get on you. For the relievers, it's getting up and down in the bullpen. It's the appearances really more than the innings that start to weigh on you about this time of year. And maybe it's that 3-week feeling where you just feel like you're underwater. Your legs are heavy, your arm feels tired, and then somewhere along the way, the weather flips for you in September, and the air gets a little bit cooler, and you get that one last wind, and you feel fresh again. I don't know why it is, but the heat of the summer, I guess it's why they started calling it the dog days whenever they did. It does beat you down, and August is a really tough month for big league players. And I guess the benefit was always that in September you could expand the rosters, but now that's even a little bit more limited. So they're fighting through it right now for sure.
Well, you'll have to go explain that to Julio and Ty France and some of these guys who all of a sudden are putting together some of the best best at bats and the best run they've had all year. How different is this team when Ty France and Suarez and Julio are all hitting like this?
Yeah, this is the team that we thought we had from the beginning, and they're on it right now. Julio hadn't been better than this all year, and he's really been, quite good since the start of July. And Ty, roughly since the trade deadline, he's been going as good as you can go. Here, as we've gone through the first 3 games of this series, I think so many guys have taken so many good at bats, and we've had to because the Royals have been really tough on the other side. And they're locked in. So it's as fun as we've been offensively in a long time. And we've talked about this in recent weeks. This isn't a new thing. This is something that's been going on for a couple of months now. Mm-hmm. And we got so conditioned to the struggles in the early part of the season that if we struggle for a day, we feel like, we're back in the vortex. But the truth is, we've been a pretty interesting offensive team for a little bit now.
That's primacy bias, Brock. I remember I was writing about that a week or so ago.
Yes.
Primacy bias is what you see first ends up biasing what you end up seeing later. Specifically on Julio, though, because what's been interesting to me is seeing him hit the way he has, contribute the way he has. And while he's hit home runs, it has not been a barrage of home runs that has shown his dominance. He's kind of been doing a little of everything, it seems like.
He's an exciting player, and we've talked about this before. From the base running and defense, which is the foundation of it all, that has been there from day one and never went away. And I think, and Scott, I don't feel like I'm betraying a confidence. Scott actually said to him last night after the game, the ground ball that he hit through the right side, which I believe was his 4th hit of the night, and picked up that run, was Scott said, that's my favorite at bat you've had all year. Just doing that little thing, and it makes such a huge difference. And And when Julio is at the center of it, and he's driving it, it does make a huge difference. And add that to the fact that at some point here, hopefully by the time we get through Houston or to Chicago, we have JP back and we're back at full strength with guys in good streaks and Julio doing really all the things that his tools allow him to do and impacting the game in that way. It makes those last 6 weeks of the season look like a lot of fun.
Two things along those lines, Jerry. Isn't that and shouldn't that be the advantage of youth? That as you talked about these dog days, in a game 120, when you're 22 years old and you've got a childlike joy to play this game and you set the table for everybody else, is this where youth should come to life a little bit on this roster too?
Yeah, young legs help. I bet I didn't feel quite as bad when I was 24 as I did when I was 33. But, it does. At the end of the day, I do think being in a playoff race is energizing. And, it does help, even if you don't have the young fresh legs. And, amazingly for Julio, and I'll go back and I'll reference a player that I had a number of years ago who, when asked if he was tired because he was playing every day, he said, I'm 25 years old. I want to play every day. and I think that's the mentality of these guys. They're disappointed when they're not in the lineup. They want to find a way to make it work every day. But, here, especially when we've been blessed here with excellent weather in Kansas City. And when we get to Chicago, I understand it's going to be a little warmer than this. So, that's when you might feel the heaviness back on you again. Those young legs will come in handy.
Would you rather see Julio hit 40 home runs or 55 doubles?
Can I take both of those things? I guess my answer to the question would be when he hit the 55 doubles, who was on base? Because in the end, it's about scoring the runs. And, 40 homers, we know we scored at least 40 runs. And what's fascinating is he has the ability to do both of those things and steal 50 bags and play Gold Glove defense. And it just kind of speaks to his talent.
Hey, one of the things we've been debating over the course of the last week or so is what the strategy is and whether it's changed a little bit over the years with a man on third and one out late in the game and the idea of trying to set up a double play with the intentional walk. A few different times you guys have gone away from that. Is that an organizational philosophy? Is it built on numbers? What should we know about that?
I do think that there are times and places where traditional baseball philosophy is still the appropriate way to go. Now, last night, frankly, we did a couple of things. We made mistakes that we don't ordinarily make, and that goes against a baseball tradition or a philosophy. I think Scott, for the most part, is not prone to putting a runner on base, especially in those extra inning situations, if that runner represents something significant. Or, in cases like this lineup, if that puts you in position where Bobby Witt Jr. is in the hole, so to speak, you don't really want to be there. So you're trying to find ways to manage your way through the innings, and I think the ghost runner at second base has really forced managers around the league to be creative in how they implement that baseball philosophy. And it's sometimes tradition is the way to go. Sometimes taking a crack at it because you're a little thin in the bullpen and you got to go win the game now is the way to go. And I do think that the fact that we've been a little beaten down a number of extra inning games, a lot of close games over the last week, does affect decision making because you're running a little thin in the pen.
What have your eyes seen, speaking of baseball tradition, and Jerry Dipoto here with us, baseball tradition when I was growing up and watching it was, you had closers, right? You had Goose Gossage and the great closers of the game, and those final three outs are all a little different. And, we've seen that massaged a little bit through the years as well. Obviously, Mooney and Brash have gotten some incredible opportunities here in these late innings to close it out in Paul's absence. What have your eyes seen with them handling that role?
In some way, this is all new to Matt. This is an opportunity, a growth opportunity. And I do think that you'll get growth pains along the way, and that's just part of the exercise. Mooney's done this a little bit before. And, with the exception of, I would say this year, while Mooney was on the IL and we were mostly, if not exclusively, going to Paul in the ninth inning, for the majority of the time since Edwin Diaz left after the 2018 season, we have been pretty, timeshare, whether it's 60% Paul, 20% second rider, 10% Mooney, whatever the scenarios, we always pick the pockets to throw, the pitchers in. And I think in Mooney's current situation, he's getting more of those ninth inning opportunities, kind of flip-flopping with Matt Brash, depending on who's prepared. And it's tough to judge in a moment because it is August, because guys are tired. And, Mooney's had a rough week, and it's probably the first rough week he's truly had since he's been a Mariner. So, being too judgy in the early going, I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that he's pitching the ninth inning instead of the seventh or the eighth. He's pitching against tough pockets while he's trying to figure out where his stuff's at. And, the night before last, when we put him in the game, we put him in a tough situation and asking him to get 5 outs. And this is, again, a beaten down bullpen that has really pitched a lot of high leverage situations dating back to last Friday. So it's been a tough stretch for him. And it was nice to have The Rock give us 7 innings last night just to give the guys down there a little bit of a break.
I'm going to ask you about him in a moment, but just last thing on Munoz, you mentioned trying to find his stuff, and just looking at the radar guns we see on TV, it looks like the velo's down a couple of ticks. Is he struggling a little bit with velo and his slider? What are you seeing with his stuff right now?
I say he has become a little more fastball centric here in the last couple of weeks, and I don't know if that's necessarily, a design, but the downtick in velo, over the weekend against Baltimore, he was throwing, 98, 100 miles an hour. But he did pitch multiple consecutive days. And then again here, it's multiple consecutive outings, and now it's a 5-out outing. And bouncing back after that, we've never really asked Andres to do that. It's the outside of the we'll call it the 2 weeks leading into the postseason last year and then during the postseason. And, there's a place and a time for that, but, getting into that mode in the middle of August is tough. But when you're playing multiple extra inning games, I think we played 4 extra inning games in the space of a week. That does put your high leverage bullpen in a position to have to go out there tired. And Mooney's out there tired right now. Hopefully we're able to stay away from him last night. Hopefully we're able to do it again today and make sure that he's fresh while we go into Houston.
Well, and so you mentioned Castillo and what he gave you guys last night, going 7 innings. He probably was not his best start in a lot of ways, didn't have a lot of strikeouts, gave up a lot of hard contact. I had a little conspiracy theory here on the show earlier this morning, and maybe you can prove it for me. Was that by design? Is he going out there and maybe pitching to contact a little bit more and trying to not necessarily strike everybody out in order to get deeper into that game?
I think he definitely did that. And the first pitch of the game was, I think, 91.9 miles an hour. and I said, well, The Rock is in give him innings mode. And I will say this, and this is out of respect to the Royals. They do a phenomenal job of fouling off pitches, putting pitches in play. They're not a high strikeout team in an era of high strikeout teams. And they swing a ton. They swing at strikes, they swing at balls, and they put them in play. And part of the reason why we've been beaten down in the bullpen is that, we were short on the start Monday with Logan. We were short on the start Tuesday with Emerson. And we just needed somebody to eat into the game a little bit. And that's what we saw with The Rock. He went out there and he did what veteran aces do. He went out and he ate up 7 innings on a day where he didn't have his best stuff, but he had a mentality when he went out there that I am getting the team to the back of this game. And he did it.
How unselfish is that? How important is it for the other guys in the clubhouse to see it?
I think it's huge. And we've seen other guys do it, but, Luis has done it whenever we've needed him to do it since the day he walked through the door. And I've said this before about The Rock. He'll go out there and he'll throw the low hit, high strikeout, dominant game, sitting in the mid upper 90s, and he looks like Cy Young, and he walks off the field with a smile. And he goes out there last night and fights his way through a lot of base runners and hits and traffic on the bases, and he walks off with a smile. He is he has that goldfish mentality, and he just moves on to the next. And he knows what the team needs, and he just gives you that thing. And he is the epitome of an unselfish pitcher. And I think the fact that he's by far our most experienced pitcher gives the other guys something to look to.
Well, the guy going this afternoon in just a couple hours has been absolutely filthy. And if Luis is The Rock and Logan's got an alter ego named Walter, we got to figure something out for Kirby, because the guy has just been – I mean, he hit, Jerry, at least on the television copy the other day, 100 miles an hour against Baltimore on that Saturday night. I mean, he's sitting upper 90s. He took the ball and shoved it for 9 innings against those guys in a shutout. How is George continuing to take these steps and emerge?
I just feel like George can do just about anything he wants to do with the ball, and it's always been this way. And from the time his stuff really started to mature, and I'm going to date back. This is probably at the alt site in 2020 when we really saw George go from excellent stuff, excellent command to elite stuff, elite command, and it's that combination of ingredients with his mind to pitch and a competitiveness that, and I don't want to downsell anybody else on our staff because it's a competitive group, but George has a different way about him on a game day.
Jerry, did he have that? Did he have that at Elon? I mean, that's the thing that struck me. I got to see him in a home game, and every inning is steaming. Like, this is George Kirby from Elon, right? There was supposedly a total command, low 90s guy. As you said, great stuff, first-round pick. But he has turned into just a fire breather. Like, when you see him in person, he is as intense fire breather as anybody as you got on your roster. Was that always in him?
I can't tell you about his full time at Elon. I can tell you in his draft year, we saw a very composed, relaxed, competitive guy who you don't know, because Elon, it's probably how we got George, is because he was matriculating at Elon. If he was at the University of Florida, it probably goes in the first 5 picks in the draft, truth be told. And we did see a competitor, but we've been blown away by just how competitive he is. And it's not just when he's pitching every 5th or 6th day. It's on the golf course. It's in the side games. It's his skills, really transcend just the baseball. He is good at whatever he tries, and he's incredibly competitive at whatever that thing is. and he holds himself to a different standard than a lot of people do. And I think that makes him great.
Well, it's been interesting watching this team, just seeing some guys, Brock mentioned the idea of sort of clearing the way and seeing some folks step up into those spots. I didn't realize Caballero had as many steals as he did until I looked up and saw the numbers the other day. Seeing Marlowe over the course of the last few weeks, I think has been just really, really fun. How about some of the guys that we're waiting to see if they can make it back? You mentioned JP. Where do you think JP is at in terms of his availability for the weekend?
Probably we're likely, if he continues to improve the way he has, we're likely to see him go out, because it's been long enough. We're going to have him go out and play at least one rehab game somewhere in the Northwest. It's probably going to be at Everett sometime, Friday, Saturday, or this weekend, with the hope that he can join us either at the end of the trip through Houston or when we get to Chicago. But, again, that is contingent on his continued improvement. The feedback I'm getting is that he feels pretty good right now. He's executing baseball activity, and we are going to get him out there for at least a one-game rehab look where he can get some ABs versus live pitching.
And how about Jared?
I'm sorry?
How about Kelnick?
Oh, yeah, he was let out of his boot yesterday, actually, so he's going to slowly get back into baseball activity. He's been throwing throughout with a boot on, but he's now being released to go do a little bit more aggressive baseball activity. And, the rehab process we knew was going to take us into September. That hasn't changed, but what day in September, I don't know, but it is, we are optimistic that he is going to contribute before the year's done.
Why can I imagine him getting out of that boot like a caged animal at the zoo? Like, already.
He ran out of the doctor's office with his arms over his head. You want to talk about competitive.
The word released from his boot almost sounded like he was released from handcuffs. Like, all right, let the guy out of his chains, and off he goes. He's going to start storming around. Cal Raleigh's another guy I wanted to focus on for a few minutes. I feel like we've gone through quite a few of the folks on the team today, but could we see a Cal Raleigh 30 home run season at some point?
We might see it this year. It's Cal. He has a way of doing the thing that you need him to do. The big homer, the big moment seems to find Cal. And the one thing that you let slip your mind. My dad said it to me watching the game last night. He said, I saw something today that said Cal has the most home runs among any catcher in baseball since last year. I said, I don't know if anybody really gives him that credit. And he's excellent behind the plate, and he manages the run game, and there's so many pluses with Cal. And I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that hits 280, 300. That's just not his skill set. But he takes his walks, he hits his homers, he finds big times to come up with big hits. And at the end of the day, if you've got a catcher that has the ability to drop 30 homers on you, be an above-average league OPS guy who, by virtue of the park we play in, probably going to sit in the 120 range and OPS plus. That's a real advantage when you couple it with real defense. And he's still so young. There's so much better that he can get.
Last thing for me, Jerry, just circling back to my first question of game 120 as a player, I'm going to imagine it's pretty cool as game 120 as team president that you get to watch some baseball with your dad and brother. I mean, how cool, just as you referenced it a couple times, how cool is that for you right now?
It's really cool. And it's one of my favorite parts about coming to Kansas City. It's as weird as the games get. I do get to see my family, and my brother lives here in Kansas City. My parents live in Omaha, and the chance to have them kind of come and visit, sitting between dad and brother yesterday. And I think we were in the seventh inning of the game, and the Rock's out there trying to finish it through, and we've got a little bit of traffic on the bases, and my brother turns around to me and says, "Hey, how are the kids?" And I said, "We're at the same game, but we're not watching it the same way."
I was going to say, do they give you grief? I mean, like, are they sitting there watching and talking trash about the team to you? Are they totally supportive? What is that relationship like?
No, but my dad is into it. He and my mom watch every game on TV. He knows the players. He has his favorites. He has opinions on what he watches, just like any fan does. And my brother doesn't really pay attention that much. He watches when we're in town, and generally it lives through the wins and the losses without really knowing the underlying detail.
That's awesome, man. What a cool experience. Well, Jerry, we appreciate it. These are a feisty little Royals team, so it would be nice to see a nice, clean, easy one today. Maybe maybe we can find a way to get out Perez, because I don't know where you're supposed to throw the ball to get him out. It seems like he can hit anything in either batter's box, over the plate, whatever. So maybe you guys got a plan for that.
I'll tell you, and we talked about Salvi. We've talked right now. Michael Matthew is just locked in. You can't be hotter than Bobby Witt Jr. has been for the last month or so. They have good players, and right now they're playing at the very top of their ability. And we got to find a way. And there's not a better guy to have on the mound when you want to find a way than Kirby.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say, I kind of like this Royals team. I was talking yesterday about how much I hate them, and I kind of do. But I also kind of like them. Like I just like that they're feisty.
They are. They fight. They play hard. They run hard. They're athletic. And, right now their pitching is just in back of where their position player group is developmentally. And they're just at the beginning of what I think is going to be a long rebuild to get them back where, they want to be. And they're going to have to build like they always have through scouting and development. And they do that. Traditionally, they do that as well as anybody.
Pretty cool. Jerry, thank you very much. Enjoy the time with your family. We'll talk to you next week.